Hey friends, Gary here. As some of you guys might already know, I'm a big fan of Micro Four Thirds camera system, and with Micro Four Thirds there are options for lenses that are small, lightweight, has great image quality and is affordable. These lenses right here, the Panasonic Lumix 14mm f2.5 and the Panasonic Lumix 20mm f1.7 are great examples of such lens. They are very versatile pancake lens that you can use for your everyday photography needs. However, recently many people have been asking me, hey Gary, which one should I choose, the 14mm or the 20mm? And in today's video, I will compare these two excellent pancake prime lenses so that you can better understand them and choose the right one for your needs. Anyway, I will be doing my comparison between these two excellent little lenses from the perspective of an enthusiast hobbyist photographer. I'm not a professional photographer, but I love to take pictures, especially with cameras and lenses that are inspiring. First, let's talk about size and weight. Once again, Micro Four Thirds is all about those smaller and lighter cameras and lenses that has been the original philosophy of Micro Four Thirds gear, and these two lenses again are prime examples of the philosophy of Micro Four Thirds gear, and that means both are small and lightweight, and as you can see, yeah, they're almost similar in terms of size and in terms of weight as well. However, even though the 20mm is slightly larger and slightly heavier than the 14mm, I think the size and weight difference is very negligible. I mean, both are already compact and lightweight lenses to begin with, and I don't think you can tell the difference between these two lenses in real world usage when you are on the field. Next, let's talk about performance, and right away with the 20mm I can say that the performance of the autofocus of this lens is slower, especially when you are using older Olympus camera bodies. However, with newer camera bodies, I think the autofocus performance, although not the fastest, is still more than good enough. 14mm is definitely faster in terms of autofocus compared to the 20mm, but in my own experience, it is not as fast as the regular Micro Four Thirds lenses. However, I can say that the speed of the autofocus performance, they are good enough. You won't notice any slowness when you are using these lenses out in the field. My personal tip regarding autofocus with Micro Four Thirds camera is just to set them to single autofocus, because as we already know, continuous autofocus with Micro Four Thirds camera suffers a lot unless you have something like the OM1, OM5 or the Panasonic Lumix GH7 with phase detect autofocus. If you want to learn more about how to get fast and precise autofocus with Micro Four Thirds cameras, you can check out my video up here. Now let's talk about aperture difference. So on the Panasonic Lumix 14mm f2.5, the Aperture f2.5 I think is large enough already, especially compared to kit lenses. With f2.5 you can start to have better background blur as well as better low light performance. However, on the Panasonic Lumix 20mm we have larger f1.7 aperture compared to the f2.5 on the 14mm, so automatically you'll get better background blur as well as better low light performance with this guy. And in terms of background blur, it is also helped by the fact that this guy is slightly more telephoto compared to the 14mm. So with more zoomed in kind of lenses with the same aperture, you'll get more background blur. So yeah, background blur with the Panasonic Lumix 20mm is amazing for what it is. So how much better is the performance of the aperture of the 20mm compared to the 14mm? It's about one stop difference. So if this kind of things matter a lot to you, background blur and low light performance, then 20mm will give you what you need. However, for me personally, I don't always need that extra one stop of larger aperture. Most of the time, I'm happy with my f2.5 aperture on the 14mm. I think being better than a kit lens is already something that helps me a lot, especially for my everyday photography needs. If I need to have that absolute exact more horsepower in terms of aperture, then I will switch to the 20mm. Now let's talk about focal length difference, and this is where things starts to get more interesting in my opinion. So first let's talk about the 14mm. This is a normal wide focal length. This has a very similar field of view with your smartphone's main camera. So it is very versatile in my opinion. You can use it for a lot of things. You can use this for environmental portrait, for scenery photography, for street photography, travel photography, food photography. The possibilities are endless with this guy. I have survived traveling to some places just using this lens as my main lens, or even sometimes my only lens when I was there, and I was able to capture some great shots. You can step back a little bit and have some like scenery photography, street photography, environmental portrait, that kind of stuff. But you can step closer and you can have some detail shots, food photography shots, all with just one lens. So if you want one single prime lens, especially a Pancake lens small like this one that can cover as many grounds as you need, then 14mm is the answer. Now 20mm I think is not as flexible as 14mm, but you can still do a lot of things with this guy, especially for things like street photography and also product shots or food photography. With the 20mm, it has larger aperture and more zoomed in focal length. So the benefit of these things is that you can get better subject isolation. You get more of that 3D pop and everything just look punchier with the 20mm f1.7. The results, the photos that you take with this guy will have some sort of elevated look on them. So in conclusion, for me personally, if you need something versatile, easy to use, and can be used for so many different kinds of photography applications, I would go with the Panasonic Lumix 14mm. If you don't mind using a slightly quote-unquote more difficult focal length, but you want that punchier result, go with the 20mm. Now let's talk about image quality, and let's begin with the 14mm. For me personally, the 14mm has a little bit of that vintage filmic quality. It looks almost organic, it looks nostalgic, it doesn't have that much contrast, but it is a good thing in my opinion. Makes everything look more buttery, smooth. It's just a different vibe from all of these modern lenses. It doesn't look boring at all. Now with 14mm, you have to be mindful of its bokeh or background blur quality. So I don't think this is a bokeh friendly focal length because this is a normal wide. It's not supposed to have amazing bokeh. You should keep that in mind. And from my own experience, the background blur quality of the 14mm is a little bit busy. That's how I would call it. If you have a texturized background with lots of details, then the bokeh will have plenty of textures on them, and that could look distracting. But again, this is to be expected with lenses of this focal length. I don't think you will find a perfect lens with perfect bokeh for this particular focal length. And again, this is an ultra budget lens, so yeah, you have to keep your expectation right. Now with 20mm, the story is a little bit different. In terms of image quality, it has a more modern, clinical vibe compared to the more filmic and organic and vintage vibe of the 14mm. Everything looks contrasty, everything looks punchier with the 20mm. And also in terms of bokeh quality, you don't really have that texturized bokeh like what you get on the 14mm. That is because the focal length is slightly zoomed in on the 20mm. So yeah, if you prefer that sort of modern look, I will go with the 20mm. However, if you want something a little bit more fun, something that's not too boring, that will give you something nostalgic, a little bit of that mojo, 14mm I think is a fun lens to experiment with. However, regarding general image quality of these lenses, both are sharp, both are detailed, they have very minimal flaws, you cannot go wrong with either one. And that wraps up today's video. So that is all for the comparison between the Panasonic Lumix 14mm and the Panasonic Lumix 20mm Pancake lenses. Hopefully this comparison has been helpful, interesting, inspiring, informative, and help you to decide which one is the better lens for your needs. Anyway, which one is your favorite lens? Something slightly wider like the 14mm or something slightly more normal, a little bit more zoomed in lens like the 20mm? Please let me know on the comment down below. Also, if you have any question, please comment down below as well. I will try my best to answer them. Also, don't forget to support my channel by liking this video, sharing this video, subscribing to my channel down below. And if you want to support my work even further, which will be greatly appreciated, please use the affiliate links on the description below, use the super thanks button to make a small donation, or purchase my travel photography course ebook called Simplifying Travel Photography with the link also in the description below. Thank you, and I will see you on the next video. Goodbye.